all CEOs, me included, we don't actually know what we're doing.
They're all sharks, so all you got to do, though, is know shark behavior.
I don't think we've ever talked about this before.
We can capture all of the wallet share.
First place you start is with the product.
That's just the first nut.
This is the Capital Stack. Hey, everybody. This is David Paul, the host of the Capital Stack podcast, where I talk to founders, operators, and investors about all things value creation in startups. Today, I am talking to Nathan Firth, who is the founder and CEO of NewRocket, which was a tech-enabled service company for the ServiceNow platform. And he recently sold it and is now off doing the new thing, running some experiments. He's in the arena, as they call it, trying things, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. Nathan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
I missed your party last night.
You did. I'm very disappointed.
Dude, my life is in shambles right now.
Tell me more.
I've got mold remediation, and I had this guy tried to tell me that I had like $40,000 worth of work that I had to do in my house. Freaked out my wife. And yeah, I was losing control of the situation. And I'm living in an extended stay right now, like a no-tell motel, with waffles that you make in the morning and like a shitty pool. And I talked to a guy and God sent me an angel last night, a mold remediation guy that was a human being. And he's like, dude, this is like $1,200 worth of work. And I was like,
great.
Can I give you a hug? and we hugged it out and it was great. Sorry I missed your party. Tell me, like, what was the event and you know, why'd you do it?
Yeah, so since selling NewRocket and since stepping away from my role there, I've just been I've been trying to do about 3 to 4 entrepreneur meetings every single week where I'm just trying to meet different startups, different founders, different, investors, and, just having open discussions. And as part of that, we keep coming across really great opportunities with, great San Diego based startups. So we've started hosting essentially larger gatherings where we just get more entrepreneurs and founders and investors together. We host it here at my office where, we can invest in startups, but also just learn from each other, create community.
California got away from community.
Yeah.
COVID. I wouldn't want to be in the real estate business right now on the commercial side. I know people that like have a hard time getting their workers to like turn on their Zoom camera.
Wow.
I don't get it. I'm talking to a founder right now that I give a term sheet. He's like, yeah, I really have a hard time getting people in the office. And I was like, have you threatened to fire them? And I don't know. Like, it's just, I guess it's not a thing anymore. You're kind of at the whim of the people that you work for. Did you find that?
One of the things, so we went from, at NewRocket when we first started, we were doing part remote, part in office. We did 3 days in office, 2 days from home. So when
before COVID
hit, before
okay.
COVID. So when COVID hit and I get a call from our lady in HR and she's like, hey, COVID, no one's coming in. I'm like, we're not going to participate. She's like, show up at the office and see how many people are there. And then sure enough, there was no one there. And so we just shifted to full-time remote. But even though I've always been a huge advocate of working from home, COVID really showed the value of working from an office. So, now that I have this office, I'm still trying to come in, 3 to 4 times a week because I just find there's so much more productivity when I can be working together with my team and having dedicated focus time where I don't have to deal with my kids running around and dogs barking. And so I love the idea of working from home and having that as an option, as a freedom. But I think, not coming into the office is really tossing the baby out with the bathwater.
And every operator that's worth their salt, like in my opinion, knows that. We don't need any scientific discovery or psychological studies to show that people work better together. Like this is not new information.
Yeah.
And you can't commute to war, man. Like you got to show up. You got to put your armor on and you got to show up. Like I know a lot of people that working from home are not working 40 hours a week. And I think everyone else knows that too. And, you just give yourself permissions. Like I'm working from home and then you have to be available and well, no, I had to take my kid to the doctor, but nobody knew that, right? Nobody knew that you had to take your kid to the doctor and you just took the liberty of doing that. So how much other stuff like that is happening? And my guess is quite a bit. So Nathan, give us the NewRocket story.
Sure. Yeah, so I was raised in a very entrepreneurial family. You knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur pretty much since probably middle school. But after a number of small failed attempts at startups, found myself working for another software company and realized very quickly that there were some opportunities. And so I was at ServiceNow. And we had just launched a product called Service Portal. I realized that this was going to be a huge opportunity to improve the employee experience for large enterprise customers of ServiceNow. So I left and founded NewRocket to be, kind of like a design agency and a services company that built employee portals, intranets, and native mobile apps for their customers. And there was no real competition in that space. There was no other partner that really focused on the user experience. So very quickly, that idea took off. And, we really focused on doing kind of tech-enabled services so that every time we did a project, we would take all of the components that we would develop, we would standardize them, make them configurable, so that with each project, we would become more and more efficient with kind of the general idea that if the perfect project would take 1,000 hours, we wanted to be able to get there with 200 man hours and then have accelerators, components, and software that could ramp up and make up for the remainder so that we're delivering 1,000 hours worth of value. We can charge for 1,000 hours, but only have to actually have, developers working 200 hours. So it creates tremendous margin for us, but it also creates a tremendous amount of value for our customers. So that worked out really well. We grew the company to about 50 employees, and then we were acquired about 2 years ago.
And so just to back up a little bit, was it hard for you to niche out, like when you saw this opportunity, like to just do ServiceNow? Was that a lesson that you kind of just admit, like, did you go straight to niching down to ServiceNow customers, or did it go wider to narrower?
I think I saw the writing on the wall pretty quickly that the moment I started focusing on ServiceNow, that it was just much easier to make a sale, and it defined who our customers were. It defined who our employees were going to be. And it just provided that level of clarity where it became very easy for us to figure out, how we were going to go to market. The moment you go more generic, then takes a lot more effort, because now we're not just looking for, one specific customer that, we can find on LinkedIn. Now you're searching a little bit more. So no, I think very quickly I realized that there was a huge opportunity to stay within the ServiceNow ecosystem.
I feel like that's rare in founderhood to narrow focus like that. I mean, I guess you lived and breathed ServiceNow, so you knew the mass amount of scale that it already had. But, I see everyone trying to do everything for everybody and not knowing that the quicker way to the sales cycle is to know your customer intimately, and to know your customer intimately, you can't know everything, right? You have to know like 5 things, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And even when people are asking me as a founder, what advice would you give me? And I'm like, find a niche market, specialize, and just become the absolute best of the best at that one tiny thing that you do. Don't try to be a generalist. Don't try to build a platform to, compete with Apple or Google or Tesla. Find something in a niche market that solves one problem and just be the absolute best in the world at doing that one thing.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, and then the productization of your services. I mean, that I hear people use the term tech-enabled service, a lot. And sometimes I feel like people do that to make their service business sound more interesting.
Yeah.
like a lot of it's more service than tech. And in my definition, if you're a tech-enabled service, you're using a technology either internally or externally that will either increase the value you have to across the rest of the market, right? So you can charge a premium, or you can deliver the service cheaper than everybody else in the market.
Yeah.
So how did you think about becoming tech-enabled, and what did that do? Like, was that like did that help on the contract value side or on the cost side?
I mean, it helped kind of across the board. And I think because we specialized, like if we were just, I don't know, say a web design agency, I don't know that this same model would have worked. But because we were focused on employee experiences built on top of the ServiceNow platform, what that really meant was that 80% of the work was the same from project to project. Every single portal we would deploy is going to have a service catalog. It's going to have a knowledge base. It's going to have an interface. Maybe there's some corporate comms and news and events and that type of thing. But the features from project to project always remain the same. So really all we had to figure out was, well, aesthetically, let's take a look at the branding guidelines. Let's take a look at who the employees are, what are the typical things that they're going to come for, and let's design that into a truly tailored, beautiful experience for the user. But then 80% of the underlying framework actually remained the same. So as we were evolving, growing as an organization, improving our designs, part of the strategy was every week we would have a product release meeting. Anytime developers were working on code, if it looked like something we were going to use time and time again, they would take that, they would clean it up, make it a little bit more generic, make sure it's highly configurable. They would submit that to the product team. The product team would have a weekly review, make sure that it was documented, it had been tested. And if it looked like it fit, then it would get merged into the product. So then the very next time we're kicking off a project, we're incrementally becoming better. And so projects over time actually take less and less time. And we're also at the same time delivering more value to the customer. And because of that accelerator that we had developed, it was actually a number of accelerators. We had a UI component library that we called Rocket Fuel. We had kind of the accelerator portal that we developed that we called LaunchPad. And then we also had another product called Orbit that was a content management system. And the three of those were typically bundled in on almost every project, but most of those were also sold as a reoccurring subscription because the customer was also getting the ongoing maintenance and all of the updates that we would make on a weekly basis. So we would have customers that would, sometimes prepay for 3 or 4 years up front to have access to that bundle of widgets and components. And, that meant that their team didn't have to take on any new technical debt. They were getting a certain amount of software from ServiceNow, and the rest of, the development of that portal came from NewRocket, and no new technical debt, no testing that the organization would have to do, because everything now had, a clear delineation and responsibility tied to someone that they could call. And so it worked.
How much of your revenue was like productized, like that was recurring, and versus like just kind of like one-offs?
It was about 70% services, 30% product.
Nice. And so you said you launched like 3 really successful products.
Yeah.
And like, how many products did you take to your customer base? Would you say like plus or minus that like didn't work, right? Knowing that not everything works. So
we actually never had a product that didn't work. And the reason was because we never built a product in search of a customer. Everything came, we had products that only one customer used, but at least we earned, revenue from it because we were working directly with them, building a product based on their needs. But the other thing that we did really well was in all of our contracts, we made sure that we owned the intellectual property rights on the work that we would do, so that if we came across a problem, we were able to build a great solution to it, then we would be able to productize that and be able to turn around and use that again.
Did you have customers push back on that?
All the time.
Yeah.
And I mean, every single project they're pushing back on, well, why do you maintain the IP rights? And the answer is, well, because what we're delivering to you, you're getting the benefit of, the 200 previous projects that we've done, because we're just incrementally just constantly becoming better. So you're getting the benefit of that. And if all of a sudden we're giving you the IP rights, that's actually limiting our ability to continue to deliver with excellence in the future.
That's a really good power statement.
Yeah.
Did that come up? I mean, how did you come up with that answer?
I think it just kind of
true, but I mean, like it's a really, really good answer.
When you're having sometimes 12 to 14 meetings a week, working with different customers, eventually you find the things that stick. You end up saying something, you go, wow, that was actually pretty smart. I should probably do that again. And so, our first meetings with customers, at year 1, 2, and 3, were probably not that great. But, by the time we're, 6 years into this thing, we've pretty much figured out how to sell in the words that really resonate with, the CIOs and the CTOs of some of these companies.
So how long was NewRocket around before you sold it?
We were coming right up on the 6-year mark. 6
years. And you bootstrapped the company.
Completely bootstrapped.
And did you ever consider taking money?
We did. We met with a number of investors early on, but when we would take a look at the term sheets, I'm like, well, if you're offering me $350,000, like that's one project. I'll just turn around and go, develop another portal, and then I'll have 350,000. If we were going to raise money, we were looking to really grow the company faster. So, we were looking, of bringing in, maybe 3 or 4 million. And when we would take a look at those types of investments, the amount of equity that we were going to have to give up was just too great.
Yeah, because you weren't a full SaaS product. So like you would have to say, it would just be too much dilution and not really worth it. The growth, it just didn't pencil. Cool. And what do you do? And so how were you able to bootstrap it? I mean, it's easier said than done, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of people romanticize bootstrapping and they think everyone can do it, right? But not everything can be done like that.
So I think part of coming from a very entrepreneurial family, we're very good at being scrappy, MacGyvering everything, figuring out how to, deliver a tremendous amount of value for very little cost. So everything about the company was about figuring out how to generate the revenue and then, allocating the best use of the capital. So, even, we, as an example, in our industry, everyone goes to the annual knowledge conference. The average cost on a 10 by 10 booth is probably about $50,000. To me, that felt like a crazy high expense. And I figured that we could do the exact same thing without having to spend that $50,000. So instead, we would rent an Airbnb, we would throw a party, we would bring, 5-6 members of the team, and we would just make sure that we were having more speaking engagements, more meetings, and delivering, a far greater presence without having to have that traditional booth. So, for example, we would, go to the conference, have no booth, but also have a tremendous presence at the conference. We would close $1 million in deals. Total cost to the company, maybe $8,000. Mm-hmm. So, that's just an example, but that is how we did it. We just figured out we have to be very careful with our capital. We're going to be very scrappy, and we're going to figure out what's the low-hanging fruit. How can we continue to grow without having to spend a lot of money?
Right. And then you have to have people, you have to sell people on the dream. People that are going to come for you, they have to know they're not going to retire off NewRocket, right?
Yeah.
They have to come in, they have to really like working there, and there has to be a motivation beyond money.
Yeah. And actually that's, I think that was one of the unique points of NewRocket as well. Very early on, when we had closed our first couple of deals, I realized very quickly I couldn't afford to go hire a quote unquote ServiceNow engineer, because starting salary might be like $120,000 to $180,000, depending on the level. And so we very quickly started working with local code schools, hiring fresh out of college, just finding people earlier in their career and then training them up. So we were able to get resources to join the team for much cheaper. But because we focused on one thing and one thing only, it was we actually were able to develop a full curriculum and a training program to get them up to speed within 3 months. So we would get, essentially billable resources very quickly. And being earlier in their career, it was a huge benefit and value to them because, a couple of years in, they're now able to go and take, that other job for, $180,000.
Yeah, it's very hard to get a job right out of coding school. There's like a big gap there. Taking the chance on the very new person is pretty difficult. But if you're set up for that, I mean, so I would say that you're, if you're looking at a Venn diagram of like operator and founder, right? I would say that you skew pretty heavily on the operator side. I mean, agencies are hard. I mean, it's a penny business.
Well, and what's funny is the way I identify is definitely more on the founder side because operating the company was scary.
Right.
Coming up with all the ideas and dreaming and trying to be the visionary, that's fun. But, when you find yourself in the grind and now you're watching millions of dollars flowing through your hands and you have, 50 people and their families depending on you, that kept me up at night.
Yeah, but I mean, you're obviously a numbers-driven person and a metrics-driven person, or did you hire for that?
Both. So I am a numbers-driven person. I like to have, checks and balances and lists for absolutely everything. But on the other hand, I don't think of myself as the typical manager, right? I found that even when we're doing like all hands and staff meetings, I brought on a co-founder, Todd Basher, who probably one of the best decisions I ever made. But I found that he was a much better people manager, and he created a really solid sense of stability within the organization. He was the grown up in the room, and so having someone that could be that sense of stability and kind of help with the more people management and the day to day, that also freed me up to be more of the visionary, thinking about what are the new products, what's the new opportunities, and where's the company going long term.
So how much? So now you're out. You've sold the company, and what are you working on today? What's keeping you excited?
So I'm trying to. I feel like NewRocket was a ton of fun. I feel like the part that I feel like it wasn't my life's work, and I feel like I have a lot more startups in me, but I'm trying to figure out now if I don't have to do it for money, now what are the things that I can do to, leave a legacy, make a bigger impact on the world. And so I am taking this time to, really think through where I want to go next and do something that is going to be really meaningful.
Is there a process to that, or is that just a lot of sitting and talking?
It's both. I'm one of those people where, I can sit in 2 hours of traffic in my car and be perfectly content because my mind is bouncing around on 15 different ideas, and I can just pick any one idea and start visualizing it all the way from the beginning to the end. And so I'm actually really enjoying this time because it gives me the space and the opportunity to really just think things through and what are the things that matter to me and what are the types of things that I would want to allocate the rest of my life to. But at the same time, I'm also realizing that I'm probably not just going to sit at some coffee shop and all of a sudden have this epiphany for the next, big thing. So I'm also making sure I'm spending a lot of time meeting with other entrepreneurs, other, product people, and the analogy that I have is just because you're a baker doesn't mean you know how to run a bakery. You still need that business person. And so in one way, I'm kind of looking for the baker. I'm looking for someone that knows how to produce the best product possible. And then I can bring my experience in startups and being an operator and match that with that person.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of value in that. And certainly anybody would be lucky to have you. And then you do some angel investing as well?
Yeah. So I'm still learning. I'm not quite at your level yet, but I've made 3 investments to date and talking to a couple of more. Nice. So that's very, very exciting.
What kind of stuff do you like?
I mean, SaaS is definitely interesting just because of the reoccurring and high margins. But going beyond that, I think also looking at opportunities where companies are making an impact and making the world a better place.
And you like the Web3 crypto market.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. I've lost lots of money, made lots of money, but people talk about, crypto's going to go to zero. But in my opinion, we're adding $1 trillion worth of debt every 100 days. I feel like fiat's the only thing that's going to go to zero. And so finding something outside of the traditional financial systems is very interesting. I love blockchain and always looking for new tokens and new projects that are bringing new utility to the blockchain. I think is very fascinating. I
was reading this thing the other day, and they were saying that most innovations really get the most adoption when they're not the hot thing to invest in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, AI or crypto is not very a big hot thing to invest in right now on the application side.
Yeah.
Right. So it might be getting some consumer traction.
Yeah.
Whereas AI right now, is getting all the hype, but I'm not seeing a lot of practical applications yet.
And I think I think we're going to start seeing more crossover between kind of Web3, crypto, blockchain, and AI and machine learning. I think there's definitely some intersection there where we'll watch, more AI projects actually starting to operate on the blockchain and what that looks like. So,
yeah, exciting times. What
that it is.
What book are you reading right now?
I just finished the Elon Musk biography. Okay. And huge fan. That was a phenomenal book. I felt really inspired after reading that one.
Sir Walter Isaacson's.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Have you read the Ben Franklin one?
I have not.
It's really.
I have it on my list.
Yeah, they talk a lot of. It kind of gives you a lot of pause on and a reassurance in America. They reference a time when a vaccine was pushed by the government and everyone freaked out and it bifurcated the colonies. And it's just you kind of look and you're just this stuff has all been done before.
Yeah.
Right. And everything just turned out fine.
Yep.
Nothing's terribly unique right now. Anyway, it was definitely an interesting audiobook for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, check that one out.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever gotten?
I think kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, I think finding your niche, I think that is something that has definitely something that has really resonated with me. And one of my favorite business books is Rework by Jason Fried of 37 Signals. And, one of the things that I have also kind of taken away from my experience is I feel like there's this pressure to grow for the sake of growth. You just want to continue to grow, becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. But one of the things that I think has been interesting, kind of looking at 37 Signals and, the Basecamp and the products that they've created is they found their kind of nice ideal size and then they stay. That doesn't necessarily have to inhibit your revenue and your financial growth, but you just find that, there's something to be said for a smaller startup and how you can be scrappy and agile and kind of pivot very quickly. As soon as you hit, a certain scale with a number of, employees, you're just going to move much slower. And so I think one of the lessons that I'm taking away from this is, going from 30 to 50, I found we moved much slower and we required much more IT and HR and infrastructure. And so I think one of the things that I'm looking at is, if I'm building another team on another startup, I'm trying to find where's that nice balance, maybe 20 to 30 employees where we can still be agile and be able to pivot very quickly and maintain that more startup kind of fun culture.
Yeah, I think what ruins that honestly is capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like capital is the reason why most companies fail.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's just it's death by self-destruction. It's not it's not competitive forces. It's the pressure of growth without not having good enough signal on product market fit, not resource constraint is like breeds like the sauce, right? If you're not resource constrained, you're just burning capital.
Yeah. Which is also interesting coming from a guy that provides capital.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I know, but I when I provide capital, I want an ownership in the company, but I hope they never spend it.
Yeah.
Like that's, but grow and don't spend. Right. So that's just kind of how I feel about it, because more money, more problems. You got a deeper capital stack. The pressure goes higher. I mean, the deal I'm looking at right now, we've got some very, very, very well-funded competition that I don't think has grown into their valuation.
Yeah.
And it's like, that stuff is crippling. You can't go from like 100 people down to 20, and like only a special kind of person can like make that work.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what are you seeing in the market? What are some of the sectors and kind of verticals within that you're looking at that you think are interesting?
Nathan, why are you asking questions to me on my show? Don't take over my show.
Because I'm working on startups, man. I want to know what you're investing in.
So if you look at hype cycles, right, and generally like where people kind of invest, we've kind of been through the hype cycle. We had the hype cycle of Bitcoin, right? Now we're kind of in the trough of delusionment, or I should say like Web3 based applications. I shouldn't say the coins, because the coins are, kind of a currency commodity, right? And if I was to look at AI, right? Like AI, I think we're kind of in that hype cycle, and we're, probably within the next 6, 12, 18 months are going to like be like, okay, this AI doesn't really work that great, right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of a magic 8 ball, and you don't really know what you're going to get. And I think right now, if we're to look at like, okay, past the trough of delusionment, and like we're kind of going into like another growth of like sustainability and like actual like connection, I think verticalized data and reporting, which is ultimately going to feed into the AI, as like, that's why like AI sucks, is because you're feeding it a bunch of kind of unstructured data in a way that like everyone just thinks you could shove stuff into a model, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to get what you need. And the models are great, but, we're still having a hard time trying to, figure out how to use AI effectively on structured data.
Yeah.
Right. So I think verticalized data aggregation and reporting, specifically into specific verticals, I think is the next big wave. So as opposed to paying Snowflake, $1 million and hundreds of thousands of implementation service revenue, like there could be the data visualization reporting engine for healthcare or for gaming or for construction, because like it knows the players, the incumbents, and then knows the stack, and it knows how the data gets pushed out from the stacks, and it can naturalize it in a way that's more effective.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. In fact, one of the startups that I invested in is very much along that line. And one of the ones that I'm looking at, which is one that you missed out on last night, I'll have to catch you up a little bit, but definitely in that same vein. So I think you're right on.
Yeah. So, but who knows? I might be wrong. I often am. So anyway, thank you, Nathan, for coming on.
Of course.
If you like what you heard, everybody, please subscribe to another episode of The Capital Stack, where we drop an episode every Tuesday. If you like what you heard, tell a friend, leave a review, cancel me, do whatever you want. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Capital Stack Podcast. Make sure to share this with someone you know that can benefit from this content. Remember to support this show by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. David Paul is the founder and general partner at DWP Capital. All opinions expressed by David and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of DWP Capital. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for decisions. David and guests may maintain positions in the securities discussed on this podcast.